The Curses and the Covenants, a History Weaver Mystery, Book 2, by Connie Worden, read by the author. Chapter 41. Was Sarah dragging out the story intentionally to aggravate me? Sarah, please, skip to the point. I can't. I have to tell the whole story or it won't make sense. Don't get your knickers in a knot, she snapped back. Well, I was a little excited in the moment when I saw the pieces I'd read about in the diary, but after I got home and thought about it, I was just scared. I started to be desperate for the guys to get those pieces out of there. I didn't want to tell them why, but I was afraid that if word got out about what was hidden in that old gold mine that everyone had forgotten about, someone might get the bright idea of digging up the mound of stones just on the other side of it, looking for more artifacts, and discover Danny's body. And then, well, everything that did end up happening would happen. But I thought maybe I could convince Joe to move the 7 pieces out of there and put them somewhere else. He'd stolen that cradle before. I thought maybe I could give him the idea of stealing the other objects and seeing if he could sell them on the black market or something. Sarah paused again. Okay. I still wasn't seeing the connection. Well, it's true what they say. Be sure your sins will find you out. In a roundabout way. I think I planted the idea in his head. And a little later, Joe told me that he and Phil had gone to move the objects. I don't think Phil knew anything about them, or what he was getting into. He's not the criminal type that Joe turned out to be. I think he was just helping out a buddy. Sarah, the boathouse. Yeah, I'm getting to it. Well, that's why I say that I should have been sure my sins would find me out. One thing leads to another, to another, to another, when you're trying to cover something up. Pretty soon you have to cover up the cover-up to cover up the cover-up. Okay, I'm getting there. Joe went to prison, as you know, before he had time to do anything with the pieces other than hide them. And Phil got a hold of me after Joe got put away to tell me about where they'd taken the pieces, and that he didn't know what to do with them. He didn't want to mess with them, because after Joe went to prison, he started to think that he could be in trouble for helping Joe out by moving them, even though he didn't know what they were at the time, or if they were valuable. But he started to have a bad feeling about them, and he told me where they'd hidden them. I told him that I didn't think he'd done anything criminal, that I didn't know who the artifacts belonged to, but yes, they might be old and valuable. I told him I'd try to think of something, and I'd try to get them returned to the descendants of the people that originally owned them without getting either of us in trouble. But in the meantime, they were probably better left where they were. They could stay there till one of us thought of a way to give them back. Anyway, Joe still had a key to one of the old semi-derelict cabins on Minor Lake in the campground that Larry's aunt and uncle own. That was the place that Danny lived with his friends that summer, but no one lives there now. That's where Phil and Joe had taken the pieces. I thought they'd be safe enough there for the time being because it wasn't summer, so no one was likely to be out at that cabin in winter. Well, when I saw the note Larry had written you about meeting him there, I was in another panic. It would be just my luck that Larry would go around to that old cabin for some reason and find the furniture and start some kind of investigation into them, and the whole story would come out. I had to stall you and Larry so I could get Phil to get up there and get the pieces out. I had no way to stop Larry from going up there, but at least maybe I could divert him away from where I didn't want him to go in the campground. I got a hold of Phil and told him I'd figure out a way to stall you and Larry if he could get someone to help him move the pieces. I know that campground a little, and the boathouse was on the other side of the campground from the cabin where the pieces were hidden, so I altered Larry's note and arranged for you to go to the boathouse, knowing that Larry would go looking for you when he saw your car parked over there. And so I locked you in to keep you and Larry busy while Phil and a buddy moved the pieces. It had been a complicated story. I couldn't argue with that. But finally she'd got to the point. So, do you know where they are now? The 7 pieces, I mean? I asked curiously. Usual Sarah shrug. I don't know. Once they were out of my hair, I'm afraid I haven't been too bothered about them. I haven't asked Phil what he did with them. And since then, I've had other things to think about. Just trying to stay one step ahead of everything that finally went down. We sat in silence for a moment. Mostly, every part of Sarah's story was fitting into place in my mind and hanging together. My questions were mostly answered. But there was one subject that I didn't feel I could let rest where it lay at present. I needed to know if Sarah and I were okay, with each other. I didn't hold anything against her, but was the reverse true for her? Finally, I said, "Okay, I lied. That wasn't the last thing I want to know from you. I know you tell me you don't hate me, but that's still a little hard to believe. Why did you give such a convincing impression of someone who wanted to kill me when you went for me in school that day? I get that you were scared of everything coming out, about Julia and Danny and Joe and Phil and all the other complications, and you were having a breakdown, but it really seemed personal at that moment." Another shrug. "I was just mad, I guess. About all that stuff you were saying, about not having friends and how I keep stealing your friends. I guess. I suppose that may have been part of why I planned the boathouse thing the way I did too. I wanted to create a distraction, maybe make you think Larry was someone you couldn't trust. Looks like that didn't work after he came and rescued you at school that day. I will never be able to look him in the face again. There goes that friendship, permanently. And Pete's friendship as well. Julie is gone. My job will be toast when they find out about my professional breach with Julia. My parents will be destroyed when they know I hid Danny's death from them. You're the only person speaking to me, and you shouldn't even be after all this. I have officially ruined my life. I may as well do jail time. I couldn't have made a bigger mess of things." Sarah buried her face in her folded arms on the windowsill, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Sarah, come on. You're not going to prison. I don't know what they can charge you with other than biting Pete, and I'm sure you're not going to prison for that. I don't know if it's a criminal offense not to report a suicide and then hide the body. You'll have to make a statement to that effect, but I'd be very surprised if you went to jail over it. And you're right. After all we've been through, I really shouldn't be talking to you, but I am. I've been reading the Bible. You should try it sometime. I didn't realize how much good stuff was in there. I think maybe that's why I'm realizing what a beautiful thing forgiveness is. There's a lot about it in the Bible, how we all need it. How we all need it from God, I mean. I'm starting to see that. I feel like I'm kind of taking some first steps on some kind of spiritual journey. But I tell you what, you'll be surprised at how forgiving everyone else will be too. Especially when they know what kind of pressure you've been under with everything going on. Anyone would have broken under all that. We won't give up on you." "You really forgive me, Ange? For everything, even for half strangling you? I'm so horrified that I was capable of that. I can almost find excuses for myself for everything else, but that was pure evil. What if I'd killed you?" Sarah softened suddenly, her eyes pleading with me to mean what I'd said to her. "Well, you didn't, and you weren't going to. You would have stopped. I know you. It's not in you to kill someone. Even in the heat of the moment, even in the middle of a psychotic episode. And yes, I forgive you, and I mean it. I told you, I love you, you goober." She gave me a half smile through the tears still glistening in her eyes. "Now are you coming home with me, or what?" She shook her head. "No, I still want a few days here just to process and get some help. It's been a long, horrible haul, keeping that terrible secret I've kept all these years. A huge weight is gone, just knowing it will soon be out in the open. But there's still a lot of healing I have to do." "I know, Sarah." I couldn't imagine what she'd been through, watching her twin dive off a bridge into a dry ravine, and then feeling like she couldn't tell anyone about it. I suddenly saw the tremendous strength of character she'd had to bear up under that kind of burden all these years. No wonder she'd done some irrational things lately, especially when she thought she'd be going to prison if the truth came out. "Okay, Goob, when you're ready, give me a call. I'll be here at the drop of a hat to pick you up. Well, an hour after the hat drops. It is an hour's drive, after all." It was good to see her smiling as I hugged her and waved and walked down the hall to the hospital entrance. As I drove home, the thoughts of the lights and the perfections kept swirling around inside my head. Julia's death had been the means of revealing the truth that sets us free. There was good coming from the tragedy. It was good that Sarah would find some healing after all these years, and secrets and lies would be uncovered. Truth was beauty, and beauty was truth, even when it was hard and painful to face. The Urim and the Thummim, and researching them, my curiosity sparked by Julia's journal, was partially what had prompted my recent spate of Bible reading. I'd learned that they were used as a means of inquiring after God, trying to learn His will, seeking God. Julia, in some way, saw her purpose as the Urim and the Thummim, whatever that meant to her. And her despair and her death had done the work of the Urim and the Thummim for me, too. Here I was, seeking after God as Ma had advised. Julia's life hadn't been nothing, as she had thought. I could see it only dimly, but it played some kind of part in some larger story. There really was purpose in everything. She was precious and beautiful, like the beautiful, precious stones she wanted to be. If only the story could have ended well for her. At that thought, I found myself sobbing till I nearly drove off the road and had to pull over. When I was finished my cry, I felt lighter, freshly washed. Somehow, it would be all right in the end. There was always a purpose. On some level, Julia had hungered after the Urim and the Thummim. She craved the lights and the perfections. Was that her way of seeking after their source? She hungered after truth and righteousness. Wasn't there something somewhere about those who hungered for truth and righteousness being satisfied? Wasn't there something about the seekers finding what they sought? I'd never known what was in her head at any given time, and I would certainly never know what was in her head in her last minutes. It was too late to ask her. But could it have been possible that her last thoughts had been ones seeking God? I'd never know. But the idea gave me some kind of hope and comfort. Anything was possible, and there was always a purpose. As I staggered in the door at Ma's house, exhausted from the emotional scene with Sarah, and with her explanations still playing through my head, another thought struck me. I thought I knew now what Julia had meant by the line, "Gold and silver, the Urim and the Thummim, they reveal what people really are." Julia saw, rightly, that everyone gets tested at some time in their lives to reveal who they really are. For many people, gold and silver and precious stones, or any other forms of money, are that test. Now that I knew that she had access to Evangel's diary, I started to see her point. Gold had been that test for our ancestors, and they had failed the test initially, miserably. Julia felt she had been carrying the curse of our ancestors' failing of their test, as indeed she had, but not in the way she likely thought. There was a lot of food for thought in that last musing, but another realization quickly took its place. Inconsequentially, it seemed. A picture flashed through my mind of the little nativity set in the wooden box on the bottom shelf of Ma's bookshelf. A little bear holding a lump of gold came back to me with clarity. Unlike the mouse and the squirrel, who were holding their frankincense and myrrh in little boxes, carved to be part of the figurines themselves, just like the little wooden robes and turbans they were wearing, the bear was carrying gold that wasn't carved from wood. It never would have occurred to me as a child that the gold in the bear's paws was pure gold, but it all made sense. I suddenly understood what Evangel had meant when she'd spoken on several different occasions in her diary about the gold hidden in the cradle. It was always in the context of the little nativity set that had been placed on display in the straw in the cradle. The bear was holding the gold nugget that all Adamson had panned out of Gold Creek, which was now a dry ravine. It was a bear who had inadvertently shown him the location of more gold. I wondered if that was why he had chosen the wooden bear to carry the gold. The realization came with a responsibility. What was I going to do about the test of gold that, most likely, Joe Delway had stolen the cradle for? I should at least tell Ma what I suspected about the little bear figurine and his treasure, hidden in plain sight. We should probably get it valued How much would a nugget that size be worth today? Maybe we'd better get it into safekeeping. As quickly as the flurry of thoughts clustered in my mind, I sensed that the weariness that came over me following their arrival was caused by the worry they brought along with them. I instantly made a decision what I'd do about the gold the little bear was holding. Absolutely nothing. If the bear had kept his secret all these years since Evangel had written her diary in 1898, he could go on keeping it forever, as far as I was concerned. The bear's secret was one secret that the Urim and Thummim of gold and silver did not need to bring to light. That one could stay hidden. April 11, 1899. Written by Evangel Adamson on the eve of becoming Evangel Lamb. Well, dear diary, this was where we began together, starting off on the adventure of marriage. And now the pages of this book are almost filled, and I believe this is where I will leave off writing about this chapter of my life, in these pages, starting off on another adventure of marriage. I must just record the latest plans that Joshua and I have been planning. After Joshua proposed marriage to me, I never expected to be living again in Beaver Row, but that is our plan at present. The little log cabin in the woods will now become ours instead of mine, at least until Joshua has another house built for us. Beaver Row has grown rapidly in the past months, thanks to the proposed railroad branching out from Penhurst to that area. Joshua feels it will soon be able to support its own doctor, and with Dr. Ramsay moving and settling in Penhurst from Victoria, Vancouver Island, Joshua believes the time is right for a move to Beaver Row after our marriage. His mother will stay on in the house here until there is a bigger house ready for us all in Beaver Row. Although our little farm in the Beaver Row area holds so many sad memories, its beauty is unparalleled in my experience, and I am quietly excited about a return to that area. I once made a covenant of friendship to its native peoples, and I should be glad if I can do better in future at living up to that covenant. That is one reason I am glad to move back. I hope to make what amends I can for past wrongs. And now I must sign off and finish my last-minute preparations for the making of another covenant on the morrow. What adventures await still!